Every sane person wants peace in the Middle East, and therefore we welcome the prospect of the ceasefire deal coming into effect in Gaza on Sunday. But just as I foreshadowed yesterday, there's much to be worried about. The politicians are falling over themselves to proclaim victory, which is unseemly. There's a sense of mission accomplished about that.
More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families.
Well, yeah, but how many hostages? And how many have been killed? What about the Bibas family? Mother, father, two tiny little boys, the youngest due to turn 2 on the weekend. Will they be freed? Or are they dead? How many hostages will still be held after Sunday? And what about the macabre agreement for Hamas to hang on to the bodies of the dead hostages, use them as bargaining tools for stage 3 of the agreement? How sickeningly evil. And what of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of Hamas prisoners to be freed? How can murderous terrorists imprisoned for their crimes be exchanged for innocent hostages who never should have been taken and whose every minute of torture and terror has been a war crime on repeat? The deal reportedly includes nauseating formulas like 30 Palestinian prisoners for every civilian hostage, 50 prisoners for every female Israeli soldier hostage. It's precisely this sort of bargaining and the fact that Hamas terrorists remain in place in Gaza that saw Gazans celebrating the deal, shouting Allahu Akbar along with the usual threats against Israel. Are these people the victims of starvation and genocide at the hands of Israel, as so many activists and leftist politicians claim? Or are they defiant and triumphant terrorists, well-fed and well-armed? Still, outgoing US President Joe Biden sees this as his crowning glory.
After 8 months of non-stop negotiation, my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration.
Well, sure, Mr. President, you were talking about May last year, but the whole world knows the negotiations were going nowhere until the president-elect said this.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. Can you elaborate? And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out.
Yeah, Donald Trump has delivered this breakthrough. The looming inauguration of Trump 2.0 has delivered this. But is it enough? Will he be happy to wait for more hostages, to wait for the defiled bodies of dead hostages? And how long will the Hamas terrorists decide to wait before they kill again? How long can this ceasefire last when Hamas has broken all previous undertakings? We will see. We hope for the best, of course, but we must be chastened by history and by reality. Joe Biden doesn't even seem to appreciate the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah.
More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th.
No, that was the deliberate atrocity that triggered this war, and it was perpetrated by Hamas, you know, the ones you've struck this deal with. Hezbollah surrendered more than a month ago in southern Lebanon. It's not just the celebrations in Gaza that tell you too little has changed. Just look at the reactions here in Australia. The Greens have put out a statement that didn't even make reference to the hostages being returned. and called the war an invasion of Gaza by Israel. And listen to this Australian Palestinian advocate.
Israel is an apartheid genocidal regime, and no state has the right to exist in the way that Israel does.
Wow, Israel doesn't have a right to exist. It doesn't give you much cause for optimism, does it? Our Prime Minister remains hopeful and a little naive.
We are focused on what Palestinians want, which is they want to be able to live in Gaza and the West Bank, to be able to live with, overwhelmingly, with peace, security and prosperity. The people of Gaza have been through an awful time.
I say naive because living in peace in Gaza and the West Bank is exactly the situation that existed 15 months ago. It was Palestinian terrorists on October the 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists, who decided to invade Israel, slaughter innocent people and start a war. We hope those elements of the Gazan community have been eliminated, but only a fool would predict that they have been. Peter Dutton holds out similar hopes, but he's much more realistic.
We should never forget the carnage that took place on October 7, when Hamas, a listed terrorist organisation, went in, slaughtered, raped, pillaged the kibbutzes, the music festival where young people were struck down in their prime. Some of these people will be released shortly. They've been in captivity and in the hands of these barbarians for about 14 months. It is horrific, and we should never forget that. And the fact that they're still held hostage and haven't been released by now is an absolute disgrace.
The bottom line is that a horrible wave of anti-Semitism has been unleashed around the world, and that, of course, was a key aim of the Hamas terrorists. That's why they'll be feeling victorious. They've made Israel a pariah in the eyes of many, and they've fomented Jew hatred globally. Our Prime Minister eventually appointed a special envoy on anti-Semitism, but then, astoundingly, he's rejected her major recommendation for a national cabinet meeting on how to tackle the scourge. It warrants a national cabinet. You're not backing down from that call.
No, I'm not backing down from that, but I do think timing is going to be important, and it's going to be important to have the premiers all available, and particularly premiers from Western Australia and Queensland, because we are seeing anti-Semitic incidents there as well. It's not just limited to New South Wales and Victoria.
Prime Minister, why appoint her if you won't listen to her? And also on the program this week, former Labor Minister Mike Kelly said that Albanese's Labor are costing themselves political support through their weakness on Israel and anti-Semitism. Do you believe that Labor will lose votes because of its weakness on Israel at the upcoming election?
Look, Chris, I'm absolutely certain of that. The government is losing ground in relation to its credibility on national security by not doing enough in this space. It's great now that they're speaking out about it, and they've referred to Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation, but domestically we need to be making it very clear to organisations like so-called Labor Friends of Palestine that they're fomenting the sorts of violence and vandalism and escalation that we're seeing in our country through not being forceful and not making sure that the right frameworks and agency activity is taking place to choke this off right now.
Yeah, I fear that what's been unleashed will not easily be brought back under control. Just as Albanese's weakness on these issues has betrayed his general political anemia and lack of conviction. And his abandonment of Israel will not be forgotten in Jerusalem, even though his Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, is there now trying to patch things up. We can all look forward to the joy of some hostages being released on Sunday, reunited with their families. Their immediate horror will be over and their long recovery will just begin. But real peace and security for Israel and stability in the Middle East, well, they remain a long way off. The best outcome for now is the one that Israel has done on its own and against the urgings of people like Albanese and other weak leaders around the world. and that is that the leadership and weapons stockpiles of both Hamas and Hezbollah have been decimated. Their bombs and guns and rockets are destroyed, along with thousands of their terrorist foot soldiers. And we can be sure that Israel will not stand by and let these terrorist outfits be rebuilt again.